Every photographer has their holy trinity, but mine may not be what you expect. What's up, y'all? It's Project Photography back with another video, and today your traditional holy trinity consisted of 3 lenses, usually a wide angle, standard, and telephoto zoom, all with an f2.8 aperture. And a lot of professional photographers coined this the holy trinity because of its versatility, the fact that it's only 3 lenses and it covers such a wide focal range. But as a landscape photographer, my holy trinity is a little bit different. So let's start with the first lens and talk about the Nikon Z 14-30mm f4s. Now, this is an incredible wide-angle lens that I use for pretty much all my wide-angle photos, especially when I'm out there capturing landscape photography. This is great for capturing more into the frame, especially with those subject matters that are a lot closer to us and have more complex elements like foreground elements and stuff. This is perfect for that. And I love the 14-30mm focal length. I think it's just so versatile, especially having 30mm on that long end. But when it comes to image quality, I love this lens. I mean, it has amazing color rendition, amazing micro contrast. It looks incredible straight out of the camera and just pops with so much contrast. And when it comes to the sharpness, I think it's pretty good. I mean, we get really good center sharpness in particular. The images don't feel like they lack at all. But especially when it comes to the corners, that's an area that really needs to be cleaned up with the 14-30. They aren't nearly as sharp, even at an aperture like f8. So yes, the 14-30 is my main wide-angle lens for landscape photography, but you might look at this and think, okay, why wouldn't he just go with something like a 14-24 f2.8? And my main reasoning is all of my ND filters are in 82mm filter threads, and that's pretty much how it's been for my entire landscape photography career. I found that with 82mm, this covers a ton of different lenses, and it's pretty practical for even smaller lenses for something like, let's just say, the 50mm f1.8s. But if I were to consider moving up to the 14-24, I would have to sell all of my 82mm filters, mainly because the 14-24 supports 112mm filters, which isn't a bad thing. And honestly, for such a wide, fast lens, that's pretty incredible. But for me, it doesn't make sense to just get that one stop faster aperture and maybe slightly better image quality, but have to trade off all of my 82mm filters and then go to 112, which may not be that practical for a lot of my lenses. And realistically, the only time that I'd use that f2.8 aperture is for shooting astrophotography, which is a niche that I honestly don't find myself shooting all that much. So sticking with the 14-30 with its f4 aperture is perfectly fine for me. If I was shooting a ton of events per se, or had some other professional work that required me to have a faster wide-angle lens, then the 14-24 might make more sense. But the 14-30 is the wide-angle that just makes the most sense for me. However, there is one lens that I do have from the Holy Trinity, and it's this 24-70 f2.8. And man, this is probably one of my most favorite lenses of all time. I remember when I first got it, I just could not stop using it and use it for everything photography that wasn't landscape photography. I use it for things like portraiture, events, street photography, any situation that essentially was not landscape photography. This was in my hand. And this is such a versatile lens, mainly because of that focal range. We go all the way from wide angle to 70mm in one lens and at an f2.8 aperture. That's really fast and especially helps with blowing out the background in low light situations. And for me, I actually use this lens a lot for video, especially paired with my Nikon Z6 III. When you're vlogging, let's just say, you can have it at 24mm to get that nice wide angle perspective. Or if I wanted to have a little bit more background blur, go to that 70mm 2.8 in order to blur out the background and make it look amazing. And when it comes to image quality, this is one of the sharpest lenses that I own. Everything in the center is absolutely fantastic, and even at the corners wide open, still very, very sharp. Amazing micro contrast, and when it comes to micro contrast, the best out of any lens that I've ever used. It sports incredible color rendition, but the only thing that I have a minor gripe about it is when I'm using it at 24mm at f2.8, we do see a little bit of vignetting at the corners, which is to be expected from a lens like this. It is not optically perfect, but it is really great when it comes to taking images, whether it be for photo or video. And I remember when this lens first came out and I first tested it, I was like, wow, this lens is actually really small compared to the f-mount 24-70. That was a big lens, and seeing how tiny this lens was compared to that was an absolute game changer for me as a photographer, because now we have a much smaller standard zoom in a much more lightweight package that's just easier to bring around as a whole. And of course, this is the best standard zoom lens that I own. But to round off our holy trinity, we need a telephoto lens, which is where the 28-400 f4.8 comes in. Now, this is my main telephoto lens for landscape photography in particular, and with such a wide focal range from 20 to 400, this will essentially help us capture any composition that we want, no matter if it's close or really far away. And for me, having 400 millimeters on that long end gives me so much confidence to know that if a mountain peak is really far away and I might not be able to reach it with something like a 200 millimeter lens, we can capture it with a 400. But even if I wanted more length out of this lens, I can put it on my Nikon Z30, which is an APS-C size sensor, and turn this lens into a 42 to 600 millimeter. And with 600 millimeters, you're definitely not missing any composition. But we also can't forget about the 20 to 70 focal range on the wider end. Now, yes, we do have a 20 to 4 to 70 lens, but having 20 to 70 on this lens in particular is really nice because, especially since I'm only going to be having this one lens out on shoot, I can know that those focal ranges that are between those standard focal lengths are going to be able to be captured. And this is quite nice because normal lightweight telephotos don't really have that 20 to 70 range on here. They normally start at 70 millimeters. So be able to have that in here is super beneficial. But when it comes to this lens's image quality, it's okay. It's not super soft in the corners or in the center. I found the sharpness to be more than acceptable enough to capture landscape photography. But one thing you do have to look out for is vignetting. There is a little bit of it, especially at f8 when you go to those longer focal ranges, which is why I like to shoot at f11 most of the time. But this lens does a great job at the color reproduction, but does lack a little on the micro contrast side. And obviously this is not an S-line lens, which it isn't meant to be. So we are gonna see a little bit of a drop off when it comes to image quality, but this lens will not be the reason that your images are not sharp. But of course, the question goes back to the Holy Trinity thing, like why don't I have a 7200? For me, I just don't really need that faster aperture. This is an f4 to an f8, which is quite dark for a telephoto lens, but 2.8 wouldn't be something that I need. It is nice to have, but I don't feel like it makes sense relative to trading off something like 400 millimeters to 200 millimeters for the 7200. I find that this focal range is perfect for what I need, especially as a landscape photographer. And that is my entire Holy Trinity. But this begs a question, like what even is a Holy Trinity anymore? Because a lot of photographers seem to think that it's the f2.8 zooms, the wide angle, standard, and telephoto lenses. But with lenses coming out like the 35 to 150, f2 to 2.8 from Tamron, that completely changes the way that we think about our Holy Trinity, because that lens covers a lot of the similar focal ranges that the Holy Trinity may cover, but in one lens. But at the end of the day, I think what a true Holy Trinity is just depends on the type of photography you're going to. To me, it's the wide angle, standard, and telephoto zooms that are your go-to lenses for your professional and your heavy-duty photography needs. Which is why for me, as a landscape photographer, I mentioned the lenses that I mentioned because that's what I use as a landscape photographer on a daily basis for my high-end shoots, whether it be for video or for landscape photography. Those three lenses are the lenses I go to constantly, and if I could only have three lenses, those would be the lenses that I would choose. And at the end of the day, your Holy Trinity might look a lot different from a lot of other photographers' Holy Trinities. You just have to get what works for you and what will cover a lot of your professional bases the most. So for me as a landscape photographer, that's what it is. But I want to hear what your Holy Trinity is. Let me know down in the comment section down below because I love seeing the kind of gear that you guys have. And yeah, thank you guys so much for experiencing the world with me today. Please feel free to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.